Hello, divas and dudes. Welcome to our nutrition class. I'm excited to get to share with you, even if it's remotely. We are here at Powerhouse Bakery, and I am so honored to be a part of the ThriveWell team. So we are bringing you health and wellness however we can get it to you. So I've been with these guys for quite a while. I opened Powerhouse Bakery with the goal to show the world that healthy can taste amazing. Charles Butt of HEB was so inspirational to me, and he said, I want you to go develop an anti-cancer diet. And so about 8 years later, here we are, and we really are helping people fight disease and also prevent disease, and really help people see that healthy is so different than maybe what we once thought. Healthy is sometimes thought of as giving up your favorite flavors and giving up things that you love and really not being able to eat well. And so one of the passions I have at Powerhouse Bakery is showing people that come in to visit us that that's absolutely not true, that healthy is not only very inexpensive, but it's also easy to do and it can taste great. If you're new to the Divas, I want you to know that here at Powerhouse Bakery, we are dedicated gluten-free, but we also respect and honor lots of different allergies and really try to meet people where they are in their healthy continuum. And so while everything is free of gluten, we also have options that are free of eggs, as well as dairy and even soy, and even some of our items are nut-free. So I'd love to have you pop in if you need a healthy meal when you're waiting for a doctor's appointment or you happen to be in the medical center area. It's absolutely my joy to have you pop in, and we can treat you to lunch. We are the home of the original cauli crust pizza, which is made with cauliflower, so it's very high in fiber and protein, and it's made with organic coconut flour, extra virgin coconut oil, and a little bit of eggs and cheese. We also have a lot of vegan dishes. As well as keto and paleo. And so again, my goal is to meet people where they are in their health journey. And for you guys, my absolute goal is to help you learn about powerhouse foods. Powerhouse foods are those that are deemed super healthy. And so how do we build our immune system? How do we really teach our bodies to get the most nutrition out of every bite we eat? And so during these nutrition classes, that's what we do. We talk about recipes, and we talk about types of foods and how to prepare them, and most of all, how to love what we eat in small, reasonable portions, and really learning what do our bodies need for maximum health. Not just about weight loss, not just about trying to fight a particular disease, but long-term health and wellness journey. So today, what I want to share with you is how to eat more from the earth. And so really learning about the very powerful legumes and beans. These are well known in the vegan and vegetarian world. They are something that other cultures have used for many decades, a millennium really, because they're not only loaded with nutrition, they also are very inexpensive and they're easy to prepare. And so what I want to do today is go over some of those superfoods that are legumes, as well as the beans, and then in the next couple of videos, you're going to learn about some other key ingredients, how to make some special sauces with nuts, cashews in particular, and you'll also know that the mighty seeds are part of what we do in everything. It's chia, hemp hearts, and flax, and those are going to be hidden in all the things that we make, and it's fantastic. So we're going to show you some of these key nutrition elements in the legumes, and we're going to show you a recipe that's coming up that will be vegan. It's called our vegan mac and cheese, and I'm going to show you how to make a sauce with cashews and then using a very special pasta. So get ready for the next weeks to come. But today what I want to share with you is some really valuable beans. So chickpeas are also known as garbanzo beans, and that's kind of a basic ingredient in any kind of vegan and vegetarian dish. They're a hard little white bean, or maybe light in color, maybe a vanilla color, and they are one of the harder beans, but they are loaded with protein and fiber. And then we have the softer beans like kidney, black, and even other colors of beans. Pinto beans are probably ones that you, of course, know about here in Texas. All of those are also beans that are very similar to the chickpeas. What I'm going to show you in your handout, as you'll be getting it, is I give you a breakdown of the calories as well as the protein and the fiber in all of these different beans. But you'll find that they're pretty darn close. In about a half a cup serving, you're getting around 200 calories. Of course, if you cook them, you know, the ratio will change. So what I wrote here for you is about 100 calories and a half a cup of uncooked beans. But of course, we want to cook them, so make sure we do that. About 15 grams of protein and over 12 grams of fiber, which is amazing. So we get so much bang for our buck, and that's exactly what we love to talk about here at Powerhouse Bakery. Now we also have the legumes. So lentils and soybeans and even peanuts fall into that category. So the big difference between, say, peanuts and other legumes like soybeans is the fat content. So we'll talk a lot about the value of each of those, but just be aware that there's some variations within the bean and legume family that we'll kind of talk on, but in general, the peanut is the real unique one that's highest in fat. The rest of them are really not going to be any fat at all, virtually none. But the most valuable part of these legumes, here the peanut gets to go back into the category, is that it is really high in minerals. So folate, manganese, and iron are great sources of those minerals in the legume and the bean family. So again, for about a half a cup, you're getting 84% of the recommended daily intake of manganese. You're getting 29% of the copper. You're getting 26% iron, and folate 71% in most of these legumes and beans. So gone are the days where we have to take a multivitamin in order to get our nutrients. What we really want to do is try to get 2 to 3 cups of beans and legumes for the week, and that's going to really give you a great boost of your nutrition for your minerals as well as your protein and fiber. And so when we again look at these nutrients, from this point on, we're going to talk about cooked beans and cooked legumes. So we'll kind of have the same idea. But in general, like I said, if you add 1 to 2 cups of beans a week, you're doing awesome. You know, and there's quite a few studies out there that talk about what benefits beans and legumes have for people. And every time we come up with positive information that it lowers your cholesterol, it improves your insulin profile as well as your blood sugar, and it improves satiety. So let's break down those a little bit. When we lower insulin levels, that means that the foods that we take in are going to absolutely decrease how much insulin our bodies require in order to absorb that food. Whenever our blood sugar is low, we need less insulin, and that's a great thing. So when we eat a cup of beans, we know that our insulin level is going to be low, and that's because it takes a lot longer for our body to digest beans. So we have a lower amount of blood sugar coming in at any one time. And that's exactly what we want. We want a small, slow titration in of nutrients, especially that blood sugar, so that we don't get a high lift of blood sugar, which needs more insulin. And that's absolutely the problem when we start to see weight gain, we start to see metabolic syndrome, we see elevated cholesterol. A lot of all those symptoms are related to how quickly our body gets a lift in that blood sugar. So if we were to compare a half a cup of cooked beans to, say, a half a cup of white rice or some white bread, big difference. The level of insulin needed to digest the white bread or the white rice is going to be quite a large amount compared to those beans, mainly because of that fiber content. So I mentioned that a half a cup of beans has about 14 grams of fiber, so you're getting a great dose of fiber. And when we talk about what kinds of fiber, all the bean family is going to have both insoluble and soluble fiber. Super valuable because the soluble fiber definitely has a good impact on our cholesterol. It helps to improve the good cholesterol and helps to take down the bad cholesterol, which is absolutely what we want. And it also gives us some insoluble fiber, which adds bulk to the gut, and it makes sure that we're getting extra fluid into the gut, which makes the bowels easier to eliminate and, of course, makes you feel a lot better. You know, there's also some great studies that talk about how the healthy bacteria is improved by eating more legumes and beans. And so we know for sure that when you have soluble fiber in your large intestine, the healthy bacteria can really flourish, and that's what we want. So those divas and dudes that have been to my classes before know that I'm really not an advocate of taking probiotics. What I'd love to have you do is have real food acting as a prebiotic. A prebiotic basically means that we're getting lots of healthy starches that are in the gut that slowly break down, adding some nutrients for that flora that's in your large intestine. That's what we call prebiotic, and that's what we want to help feed and nourish that healthy bacteria in your large intestine. So again, legumes and beans are perfect for that because it's giving us all that nutrient. So if we look at a little more detail about these different types of beans, I don't know that I could say one is better than the other. I mentioned briefly that chickpeas take a little bit longer to cook. They are nice in a cold salad, for example. If you marinate them in a bath of some vinegar or lemon juice or some other kind of citrus and have some olive oil, it makes a great cold salad, and it does help to soften them. Whenever you look for beans that are already prepared partially, it's a great way to go for chickpeas, to get them canned. You can buy them dried, but it takes a lot longer. So you'd have to boil them at least for an hour, maybe more, and let them cool down, and again, probably cook them a little longer, depending on what recipe you're trying to develop. But canned garbanzo beans are fantastic. This is a brand that I really like. It's low sodium, it's Central Market Organic. And notice that even on the front of pack, it does say that it's a low-fat food. It's an excellent source of fiber, which we've mentioned. Now, if I flip it around and I look at the nutrition facts, and those of you that have been in my class know that I have mixed emotions about the nutrition facts panel because it does not always give us all the information that we want. It gives us what the USDA requires, which is good, but you know that looking a little farther into the ingredient list is sometimes more valuable than just the nutrition facts. But when we're looking at a single food like garbanzo beans, the ingredient list is pretty short, as it should be. So all this has is organic garbanzo beans, water, and sea salt. Love it. You'll see that in some beans there will be other things added, some stabilizers and some sugars and extra salts, and so that's something that you're going to want to watch when you do buy a canned item. You want to make sure that it's really just the bean, a little salt is okay, and not much else. A little tidbit of fact too is that the other beans, not garbanzo beans so much, but other canned beans do tend to last longer than if you boil them from the dried state and try to keep them in your fridge. That's a little tip that I learned here at Powerhouse Bakery. We started with dried beans for everything, kidney beans and pinto beans and black beans, and we noticed they didn't last as long in our healthy meals to go. And that's mainly because adding citric acid in the can is common, and of course that increases the shelf life. But if you're just cooking at home and you want to be able to have a fresh batch of slow cooked beans of any variety, go with the dried variety. But I do like having canned garbanzo beans. Now if I look at the nutrition facts, in a half a cup serving, which is 125 grams, we're looking at 2 grams of fat naturally occurring in the bean, and those fats are all going to be polyunsaturated. So remember I mentioned that a cousin to the bean is the legume, like the peanut. And that peanut, which we'll talk about a little bit later, has a lot more fat, of course, than the 2 grams in a half a cup. I bet you could guess how many grams of fat are in 1 tablespoon of our favorite peanut butter, and it's a big difference. But with this garbanzo bean, I'm going to go down the list so you can kind of see what the nutrition facts tells us. Sodium, 130 milligrams, which is actually very low for a half a cup. And oftentimes people get confused about sodium. If I have a customer that comes in and says they want to follow a low sodium diet, it's hard to know what the context is. What is low sodium? So I always like to help people understand what we're comparing. So on one side, this nutrition facts panel will say that 130 milligrams of sodium is 6% of our recommended daily allowance. That sounds pretty small, but of course that's depending on if you use the RDA level of calories. And that's based on a 2,000 calorie diet, which a lot of us do not eat that much. So of course it would be very different for an individual that's eating less calories. That means that the little bit of sodium that goes into this can of beans is going to be more than the 6%. Because, you know, if it was me and I was following a 1,000 calorie diet, it would be twice as much, right? 12% of my total sodium needs for the day. But again, it's still pretty low. The carbohydrates in a half a cup serving of garbanzo beans is 19 grams. So is 19 grams of carbohydrates a lot? That would be a question for people. Especially, I have customers come in and say, I'm following a low carb diet. However, they're not really sure what low carb means. And so I try to help them see that if in a typical day you need 100 grams of carbohydrates, this is very reasonable to have 20 grams for your day. Most people need to have between 100 and 200 grams of carbohydrates in a day. If you're following a 2,000 calorie diet, you need about 200 grams of carbohydrate. So again, this is a great way to understand if you're following a certain calorie level. The Nutrition Facts panel helps you. But also know that in general, a healthy meal should have between 30 and 40 grams of carbohydrates in a meal. So if I'm getting 16 or 19 or 20 grams in part of my meal, that's great. In addition, when we look at the type of carbohydrates, remember I mentioned that beans are awesome because they have soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. So now we can sort of borrow from one of our diet plans out there called the keto. People that are following the keto diet are very curious about where their carbohydrates are coming from, and they always bring up a term called net carbs. Net carbs means that they get to subtract the amount of fiber that's in their carbohydrate food and only count what's left after they take out the fiber. So the good news is, if we were to take out the 6 grams of fiber from the 19 grams of total carbs, now we've got a smaller number to play with, right? And that's what I love to tell my keto diet followers, is that beans are a great way to use the carbohydrates that you're allowed if you're on a calorie or carbohydrate restricted diet, because you get to subtract out the fiber and you still get to have all the nutrients that are loaded in this wonderful legume. Also, this label is going to give us some information. It gives us a little bit of idea about calcium and potassium and iron. But again, those numbers are so hard to make sense of because it'll give us 1% or 3%, and it's always based on that 2,000 calorie diet, which again, a lot of us are not following. So in general, we know that all beans are a great source of minerals, especially these top ones: folate, manganese, copper, iron. In a fairly small serving, you get a small amount of calories, you get a great source of fiber, and of course a great source of protein. And just as a summary, the garbanzo beans are the chickpeas, and they do require a little more cooking, so I love to recommend you use it in a can. And now I'm going to open up my beautiful little red pot here. I want to show you these beautiful dried beans. So check these out. Not only do I have the beautiful red beans, but I also have some of my absolute favorite items that we serve here at Powerhouse Bakery. The split dried peas, so these are green peas, and these are brown lentils. So all of these are going to be in the category of legumes and beans, and they are all loaded with great nutrition. So I absolutely love to make sure that these are included when we talk about all these valuable nutrients. And so when we cook a beautiful lentil stew, we are going to use those lentils that I just mentioned, but we're going to use a lot of flavors. I always warn people, whenever you're making something like legumes or beans, you've got to add in lots of flavors. Otherwise, you're going to be so disappointed, because if our palate is used to restaurant food, pre-packaged foods that have a lot of hidden sodium and a lot of flavors added, it'll taste so plain and boring if you don't plan ahead and put lots of flavor in there. So if you need some ideas, I would love to share with you. We sell our spices here, and you'll have to come to one of our Spices from Around the World class where I can teach you how to do these great combinations. Whether you use Himalayan sea salt or regular salt or some other fancy variety, all salt is salt. Most important that you have it in your bean recipe. Okay, so what we want to do is make sure that if we're going to be cooking any of these beans that are from a can or not, loaded up with some good spices. When we look at the cultures that make these dishes, Indian, Asian, they use lots of bright colors too in their spices. So I want to make sure you know that those colors are absolutely incorporated. So things like curry and paprika, they're going to add soft flavors, but then you also want to add some pop. So it could be some of the peppers, chipotle or jalapeno, or Anaheim. Any of the peppers that are going to give you a nice balance of flavor are going to be really great. Now, when we cook lentils, we do tend to make it a little denser and stiffer. But again, you could make it a more of a broth style and use it as a soup rather than as a bean or a stew dish. The other one that I wanted to talk a little bit about were these beautiful split peas. So this is a dish that I grew up on. I absolutely love split pea soup. A common way to add flavor to the split pea would be to add a ham hock or some other kind of meat. Typically it's a pork or ham, but I promise you it is absolutely delicious without adding an extra protein or fat. Just cooking them down. The trick is to do slow and small amount of water. So just adding enough water to cover the lentils and the split peas are going to be so valuable in making sure that you get all the flavor of those beautiful colored spices and the salts that you're going to add in, and making sure that you have all the nutrients. If you cook your legumes in water and then you have to pour out some of that water, you're going to lose some of your minerals. So you want to try to keep just a small amount of water, low temperature, so you don't get any burning. The lid should stay on in a good seal as you're cooking, and then just keep an eye on it, adding a little more water or broth as they're cooking, and you'll get a fantastic product. If you're new to cooking beans, I would love to encourage you to get a book. This is just one of my favorites that I got off my shelf, but this is the ultimate guide to cooking with the world's most versatile plant-based protein, Cool Beans. And so it's very fun, and the pictures really encourage us because we, I think, lose track of how beautiful nature has really made beans. They're absolutely loaded with color and texture and variety. And so whether you pick this one or any bean book or lots of recipes even on the internet, know that whether you're starting with a can or you're starting with a dried state, the first thing that you want to do is make sure you have a recipe that's going to give you lots of beautiful colors and flavors and textures. Many of you probably know hummus is a mashed version of the chickpea or the garbanzo bean. You can do that exact same thing with lentils. You can use a lighter colored lentil, for example, the bright orange lentil. You can cook it, like I'd mentioned, with a very small amount of water, very slow, and you can turn it into a nice rich paste that then you add some other oils and make it a wonderful dip or a way to scoop on with your veggies. Now the difference is the beans are a little bit tougher, but you've probably seen a black bean that's mashed. So like we've had refried beans and pinto beans, you can do the same exact thing with any of these beans. You can mash the kidney bean and give some good texture, and you can swipe that on some toast. You could add it to a tortilla, and it could be a wonderful way to do high protein spread that's made with the bean. And these recipes are in here. You can add roasted garlic, and it's a fabulous way to have a wonderful texture and creaminess to that nutrient-rich bean. So notice that while we serve it as a stew or a soup, you can absolutely serve it as a spread. And it's just a matter of how much moisture is added. The trick is to do low and slow on your skillet, or you could do it in a saucepan. It's the best if you have a lid that you can kind of see through, so you're making sure that you have just enough water to keep it interesting. Adding a little bit of sesame oil or olive oil are also great ways to really keep that texture creamy and luscious. And again, these types of books will really give you some great ideas. Here's one of the pictures that I absolutely love, and it's showing all the different colors of the beans. So even the black-eyed peas are in the bean and legume family. I know some families use that as a traditional good luck meal for New Year's, and again, they are very rich in fiber and still high in protein, and a great source of all those minerals that I mentioned, especially folate. And then we have the softer lentils. So I'd mentioned the brown lentils that we often use. You can also get a dark green French lentil that is going to stay more like a bean. It won't cook quite as creamy as some of these lighter colored ones. The orange ones are beautiful. They are going to mute the color just a little bit as they cook. So don't be discouraged if they change from this beautiful bright orange to a little bit softer orange. But you can make that color pop by adding in our favorite orange spice, which is turmeric. Yes, add in turmeric, so now you bring that color right back and making it beautiful. And then we have these dark, rich, beautiful red beans. And again, you can really accentuate that beautiful red color by using some of our red spices. So what red spice? Yes, smoked paprika. That is one I love to add bright colors to. So again, a book like this is so fabulous because it will not only give you a lot of recipes, it also gives you great technique on how to modify the texture of your beans. The longer you soak them, the easier it will be to actually cook them. And again, you can cheat by buying that can, but if you really want to experiment with the texture of the beans, getting them in a soaked format, buying them dried is a great way. It gives you lots of versatility. Okay. Now, some people worry about the gas forming of beans. We always say the beans, the musical fruit. If you have a sensitive stomach or you tend to have more gas when you're eating a legume or a bean, soaking them and rinsing them are the important steps. So you'll want to make sure you soak the bean. You could boil it for maybe 10 minutes. Pour out that water, put some fresh water in. You could even do that series twice. You're getting off the initial starch, and it makes it much easier on your body to digest that soluble fiber, because that's really what it is. The soluble fiber, the undigested starch, makes it to the large intestine, and the healthy probiotics are really starting to work there, and you're getting more and more nutrients for your healthy bacteria. So again, these kinds of books are absolutely so fun, and when you come into my cooking classes, we're going to be adding this really fun dimension to application of our legumes and beans. Next time, we're going to be talking about a wonderful seed and nut, and I'm going to show you how to make a creamy sauce using the cashew. And then we're going to put both of these ideas together and make a fantastic vegan dish called a vegan mac and cheese. So it's coming up, and I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thanks for joining me at Powerhouse Bakery Nutrition class for the Divas and the Dudes.